an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Broadchurch, Season 1, Episode 8. In this episode, I should have known. I feel like Ellie. Sob. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much, I guess, to Paul for commissioning this episode. Paul, if you're out there, I've got a bone to pick with you, sir. This is brutal, you guys. Oh my God. All right. Let me just talk about it. 'Cause I couldn't wait yesterday. I had one more recording left. I had to record Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And I recorded the penultimate episode right before. And sometimes this will happen where I'll be so eager to find out what happens that I start watching an episode even though I know I can't finish it. And I will just get it rolling and watch a bit of it in my little break and then have to pause and come back to it. And I wasn't ready. I kind of expected that the reveal of who did it would fall later on in the episode than it did. So I started it without really expecting to get hit with the whodunit. And let me tell you, I did not start Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in the right headspace at all because I was so fucking shook that I couldn't stop thinking about it and I had to hit pause. And I really, that's exactly what I was about to say, Cheryl. Last episode, I really hammered home how in something like this, you kind of have to care who did it. Like the person who did it, not just care who did it for the sake of wanting to know, but whomever committed the crime, it has to be a bit of a gut punch. And oftentimes what these mysteries will do in order to try, in order to try and make it a gut punch is, and by these mysteries, I mean when you're doing something that's sort of rote, a cozy mystery where we all know why we're here. And it's something that's sort of comforting in the fact that it's predictable. And usually what an author will try and do is they will set up somebody who is a good friend to either the main character or just a side person who just seems a little sardonic, pretty witty. And oftentimes that always raises my red flag. When somebody's a little bit too cool for school, I'm always I bet this motherfucker did it because they're trying really hard to make him likable. And the thing with Joe was they did not do that at all. Joe really felt like a cinnamon bun. There was no effort made to make him super charming exactly, or anything that is sort of the marker of we're working hard on getting the audience to like this character. It was much more, we're just going to let him be the sweet house husband and you guys are just going to like him because how can you not? And they were right to do that. Because that makes him fall so far to the background and so far out of what we ever would look at that when you find out that it's him, you feel exactly as the community did. And I also really love, and by the way, I'm not going to really talk about a lot of this episode in sequential order for obvious reasons. So everybody just, I hope that you're fine with that. I suspect you are. The fact that they decide, the writers being they have decided that they are not going to make Joe an easily defined pedophile. It's very clear to the viewers that he is, right? We can see this. What basically sends him over the edge is Danny suggesting that that is what he is, which is correct. Danny is right. And he knows Danny is right. And that's what makes him fly off the handle. However, he hasn't actually committed any crime yet. There hasn't been actual sexual abuse. I would say what he is doing is abusive, but the law would not see it that way, right? And the fact that they decided to refrain from having him be an active abuser in a way that I think we are all comfortable with being like, oh, that's a bad person who deserves to be fucking shot. Like, there is a real, like, torches and pitchforks vibe to pedophiles in our culture. And I mean that in a weird way where we love to like talk about how pedophiles deserve to be fucking castrated. And we always say castrated because in our minds, pedophiles are always men. Not true, but setting that aside, at the same time, we will like act like we don't know that Uncle Fred definitely abused our little cousins and have him come to like Thanksgiving, and we'll all act like we don't know. And that's also a thing. So it's a really bizarre disconnect in society where we simultaneously act like this is the worst thing a person can do. And on the other hand, are completely willing to not only ignore it, but make it like other people who decide to bring it up are the ones that are causing trouble. And it's weird. I don't understand the way that we operate with that. So I just want to put that out there because I think a lot of us have that experience, you know? And it's just an odd thing to live with, especially as a kid, because when you're a child, like if you aren't a victim, you're very aware that of like the delineations between right and wrong. And when you find out like, oh, there's been stories told about so-and-so and don't, you know, you shouldn't go near him and you shouldn't be like alone with him. And you're just like, why is he here then? What? And it is just, there's a fucking, I don't understand. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of, I don't even know if I want to say admire, but I respect the fact that they restrained themselves from having there be anything that was like quite as sordid as outright abuse. They made it more that he was like towing the line and toying with this desire and restraining himself. And I think that that is something that we don't address enough, is like the number of people out there who know right where the line is between what's acceptable and what they want. And they manage to like just dance right along that border. And therefore nobody can actually call them out, but everybody knows it's weird. And those people are usually highly aware of the fact that they're towing that line. So that's what wound up happening with Joe. And Danny says something to him, why don't you do this to Tommy if that's what you want so bad? And that's it. Joe like grabs him by the fucking throat and screams, I am not that man. And it's just clear Danny fucking hit the nerve. Like, not a nerve, the nerve. And before he even realizes what he's done, he's choked him to death. And I really wonder, like, if he had had any sort of like CPR skills, would he have been able to resuscitate him? Because I feel like it was a quick, like when somebody gets strangled, they're usually, you have to really hold them for a while before they're actually dead. Usually there's a bit of a window there where you can bring them back. But even if he could, then there would have to be an explanation as to why he's got grown man-shaped handprints around his neck. I don't know what that would have, what would have happened there. Jill is in the comments. It was definitely abuse, but it's uncomfortable because the boys were teenagers versus kids and weren't, quote, suffering. I mean, the boys were 11, right? Wasn't Danny 11? I don't feel like... she says the teens were being groomed. It really opened up a discussion about it in the UK at the time it aired. Floor says, this show made me love Olivia Colman. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Simone says, and society just accepts men starting to date women the minute they turn 18. Yeah. Ashley says, Joe was a paramedic. Oh my God, Ashley. I forgot. So he definitely could have resuscitated him. I feel like that's like even more damning. I didn't even think of that. Ooh. But yeah, he wasn't a teen. He was only 11. I feel like I remember her specifically yelling he was 11 at him in the scene. And I mean, he wasn't suffering in the like sense that so many people would probably just, but obviously this kid was suffering. It's clear he wasn't comfortable with what was going on, or he wouldn't have, like, you know, it's the sort of situation where when you are that age, you like make the best of it. So he was getting gifts out of this guy. He was getting a wad of cash out of this guy. And yeah, maybe he's uncomfortable, but he was drawing a line and being like, I know what you want to ask me to do, and you're not willing to ask me. And it felt to me like he was saying, because you know I won't, because he wouldn't. And maybe eventually, because he was actively being groomed, that would change. If this had gone on longer, maybe Joe would have either worn him down or offered him enough money. But it seemed really clear to me that he was suffering. I mean, this is like something that wound up getting between him and his best friend. And Tommy, it turns out, was really angry because basically Danny dropped him as a friend, saying that he had a new friend now and he didn't need Tommy anymore. And it's so like incredibly upsetting to know that not only did he like drop Tommy as a friend for Tommy's own father, but that Tommy probably like felt the sort of, I mean, it could go either way. It's like, was his father giving him inappropriate attention and then that was diverted to somebody else? Or was his father really good at keeping that attention appropriate and Tommy just sort of noticed that it had lessened because his father was spending it on somebody else, and there was like a sort of subconscious jealousy there? Because what Joe uses as his excuse is that Danny did not have a good relationship with Mark, and that he came to Joe looking for a father figure, which of course later on he tries to throw in Mark's face, and Mark is having none of it, which good for you, Mark. And I wonder if that wasn't a factor at all, you know, for Tommy. Like this feeling of, there's a sense sometimes where you don't know exactly what's going on, but like there's a weird energy. I wonder if that played into it at all. Oh no, Jill says I wasn't excusing anything by saying he was a teen. Oh no, I didn't think that. I was just saying I didn't think that was true. Just comparing it to an older child having agency versus a small dependent child. Yeah, I didn't think that. Don't worry, Jill. I just meant like, if people were saying that, that's not actually what was going on. And I mean, you do get into a gray area when kids are a certain age where you want to allow kids to have agency, but you also want to be honest about the fact that, yeah, at 17, you are capable of making some decisions, but there are also things that you aren't even aware enough that you don't know enough to realize that you aren't ready to make this choice, you know? And so that's always a weird spot to be in. And for me, really the determining factor in those sorts of situations is, was the kid, like how much of an age difference was there between the kid that were trying to give agency and the person they were engaging in behavior with. Because if that age difference was like 4 years, 5 years, then okay, I'm willing to give them that. If we're getting into 8 years, now we're starting to get icky, especially that age. That's a major difference. Even 4 and 5 years can be a major difference. So it's just all like sort of a case by case basis as far as I'm concerned. And Joe, like when he's talking about it with Alec later, Alec is trying to understand, and Joe screams at him, "If I don't understand, why should you get to?" Which I swear to God is one of the best lines I've ever heard, ever. Like, oh damn. And what's so annoying is that I think Joe does know. He just is in denial about it. That's what spurs the fucking murder, is he just doesn't want to see the reality of who he is and what he is demanding of this kid and how wrong it is. But I mean, there is a feeling there of just familiarity where I know that people will ask me, why do you think that? Why do you do that? And I just want to be like, I don't fucking know. I don't know. I'm a fuck up. Okay. I don't know what to tell you. And so in that instant, I was kind of like, ah, man, Joe, don't make me relate to you, dude. I hate this. Okay. We're going to back up and we're going to actually, I'm not going to go through it completely chronologically, but I have to talk about the way that this episode begins, because I had sort of fallen for the misdirect at the end of the last episode where we have Chloe's boyfriend telling them that they used to go out and catch animals with Nige and Tommy, or no, I don't think Tommy was involved. Was he? I think it was just Nige and Danny and him. Maybe the three of them. Was there another person? And when this bomb is dropped, and we already have Nige in our sights, and he seems like a real fucking creep in that last episode, and I said that before. I'm actually kind of relieved it wasn't Nige, because he seemed so obviously a weirdo that I was like, I don't love that, because there's just, it's really, I feel like this is a very special episode. Not like that. I feel like this storyline, though, is really unique in that they have somebody who genuinely seems like a really good-hearted person be the bad guy in a way that just floors you. And like I've said, it's either usually somebody who's a little too charming, a little too fun, and they just manage to misdirect by being so likable. Or we'll get somebody who's obviously a bit unhinged. And both of those things can work. It's not like they're just, but this is really how I think a lot of these stories in life actually shake out. It'll be somebody that everybody thinks, my God, what? That guy? No, not him. Are you serious? And it is a true shock because people thought they knew. And that's a really tricky thing to manage to do with an audience that is sharp-eyed and looking for everything. I would love to know, show of hands, how many of you had started to suspect Joe? Because I didn't. I'll straight up say, I like to be smug sometimes and be like, I saw this coming, or I had an inkling. I didn't. There was one instant where I thought to myself, God, what if it were Joe? And it was what if it were Joe because Ellie would feel terrible? Not, what if it were Joe because I ever really actually think it might be Joe? It was just sort of a, if I were going to pick the most unlikely person that would really fuck things up for everybody, who would it be? And he was the one that I thought of. Owen said when I was like watching this the other night, and he didn't watch the finale, and he's only seen like snippets, so he isn't spoiled, and I'm going to try and get him to watch the show. But when I watched it with him in the room, and I said something like, oh man, is it that guy? I don't think it could be that guy. And he said something like, I think it was David Tennant. And I just started cracking up because I was like, that would be amazing. Like, that's really the only person that I can think of that I'd genuinely be like, okay, I'm truly shocked. I was wrong. I was very wrong. Let's see. Jesse says, didn't see it coming. Jill, I didn't. Megan, not at all. Rashawn, I didn't. Rosalie, nope. Nameless person. Total surprise. Cheryl says, I did actually. During the interview with Tom, he was acting a little odd. That was like the interview here with Tom was the moment that I knew in this episode, but the previous interviews, I didn't get it at all. It was like, once he stops the questioning of Tom, and like, when Alex says, oh, and he was communicating with one other person actually, and he's being weird and coy about it, and then they get up and stalk out, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And my brain just sort of shut down. And then, of course, that awful scene with him and Ellie on the beach, where he already knows. You know, he's asked them to, like, they get in touch and they're like, hey, there's tracking on the phone. Somebody switched Danny's cell phone on. And he very obviously prevents Ellie from following that and sends her to do something else while he goes and follows I was just like watching it like, oh, Alec, because I could see how really broken he was at this woman that I think he's grown fond of despite the fact that they haven't had a great relationship, and to have to like tell her this, you know? So by that point I was like on board, and I'm sure most people had figured it out. But in the previous episode, when like Nigel's mother, Susan, tells him like, I know I saw you, I had no reason to not believe that she knew that was him. She seemed so certain. And I kind of love that it just turns out to be, somebody who was like, had a shaved head, similar build, makes a ton of sense. It's completely believable that they would be mistaken for each other. This is something that, again, with a cozy mystery thing, especially in like Agatha Christie, when you watch Poirot, everybody's got a fucking fake beard and glasses and a hat and the whole thing. Like, people will actively try and disguise themselves. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I buy that. They don't look like themselves. And other times I'm like, that's clearly the same person. Come on, guys, wake up. And I really love that there's no disguising in this. It's just that these men happen to look really alike. And it goes to show how unreliable eyewitness testimony is, because we really do think we know what we saw. I mean, it's insulting to us to have somebody tell us, I don't think that was them. And yet, I can't tell you guys the number of false memories I've had where I'm like, I swear I can picture in my mind putting my keys here, and they are not here, what the fuck. The number of things that I would just put my hand on a Bible and just with complete certainty swear to, and I would be wrong because I'm a person and I'm wrong a lot. But we're like determining whether people live or die by this shit. It's insane. So let's see. April says, nope. Fleur says, never occurred to me. Cheryl says, I was torn between him or Nigel. Jill says, the narrative laid out suspects and he was not involved in that way. Oh yeah, completely. Ms. T, never occurred to me, but Joe did say a weird thing at dinner. Didn't tip me off though. Did say a weird thing at dinner. Ooh, Miss T, remind me what he said, because I don't remember. Simone says, my first time, no, but on the rewatch, there are some great hints, like Joe looking sad when Tom was at the skate park. See, I thought the sadness was realizing that Tom was getting, like, swooped on by all his friends who want to talk about a murder victim, and realizing, like, oh, your kid's never going to get to be normal again because he was best friends with this kid who died. But no. Ms. T, I love that too. She expected it so much, and Nigel is pretty weird and angry. Yeah. Him saying, you're going to tell them you made a mistake and it wasn't me you saw. they are very careful to have him not say, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I wasn't there. I don't know who you saw, but it wasn't me. The way he reacts sounds very much like he's like, you're going to lie. Okay, go back and lie for me. That's the way he sounds. And really, when you like take a step back, it doesn't make a ton of sense that he would react and not deny it the way that he does. But also, the fact that this woman has like such a fraught relationship with him, he sees her as this outright threat, and I think maybe is wondering if she's doing this to him on purpose, you know? So, Cheryl says, I think it might also have been because no one asked Joe his alibi or focused on him at all as his own character rather than just Ellie's husband. I was suspicious due to the lack of focus on him. Yeah, I could see that. I was sort of like, you know, when I was saying last episode how I really needed it to be somebody that I like had grown to care about, he wasn't even somebody that came to mind because I don't see him as a main character. But it's cleverly done because he is in so many scenes with her, and he is in... there is just this sort of sense of him being like the reliable guy for our main girl that you grow fond of him and affectionate in your thoughts toward him. Because not only is he like seeming to be a good person, but he's also taking on like a really non-traditional role. And that can be hard for men's masculinity. And so there's an extra modicum of respect that I grant somebody who is willing to do something that's a little bit non-traditional. And, you know, it's a shame because like, I don't want it to, I don't want to be like, well, this guy's staying home with the kid. Obviously he wants to be around kids because he's a pedophile. Like, no, you know, but when you step back and sort of look at it, you're like, well, was that part of it though? Like, is that why you decided to give that up and stay home mostly? What is going on? I don't know. Let's see. Miss T says, Nigel thinks she's making it up because he thinks they both know he wasn't there. He doesn't have to deny it if she's doing it on purpose. That was sort of what I wound up with, Miss T, when thinking back on that. I was like, I think he thinks she's doing this on purpose. But then she says, but it was you I saw as he's leaving. And I guess he's taking that as her refusing to, like, retract her statement rather than her actually doubling down and saying, no, yeah, I did see you. Flora says, a lot of white men look identical. There are 2 bald men in the office next door to my house who look exactly like Joe. Oh, dear. Simone says, he also jokingly asks Ellie if he is a suspect, and it's just totally brushed off. Ooh, I can't wait to do a rewatch of this. Owen is going to have to, because I've been saying to him, I would like you to watch this, but I don't think you will, because it's sort of heavy. And I'm thinking the fact that it's only 8 episodes, I might be able to persuade him and win him over, you know. Cheryl says, I'm not sure if he ever acted that way toward Tom or the baby. Yeah, and that's sort of, like, I think he probably didn't act that way, but there was a desire there, and I think that's why he reacted the way that he did to Danny. Have you guys ever seen the movie Happiness? I can't even say the name of the movie without, like, grimacing. Happiness is one of the most disturbing films I ever saw, and it's not like, you know, it's disturbing in a human nature sort of way rather than, like, you know, deeply violent or anything. But there is a character in that who is a pedophile, and he clearly wants to rape his own son. And he goes after other boys instead, even though it's clear they are stand-ins. Like he's choosing boys that look like his own child. And it's so deeply fucked up. And it's like weirdly tragic to watch because you can see how much he fucking hates himself. And it's not like I want to be sympathetic towards predators and pedophiles, but I do think that there is something like innately wrong in people like that they can't help. And that is not to say that they don't have control over their actions. You can want a thing and just not act on it because it's fucking wrong. But to live constantly fighting something that is so deeply damaging and wrong is a really, like, truly terrible way to be as a person. And it's a really heavy movie. Like, it's the kind of thing that I went to see it with a bunch of other students when I was in college because it was being shown at the, like, university theater, and nobody knew what it was about. And it was sort of an independent movie, and we all came out of there like, what the fuck did I just watch? Because they do not at all shy away from, like, the reality of what it is he's doing. They aren't trying to make him sympathetic, but you can't help but be like, oh my God, the whole time. Rashawn says Spanking the Monkey is the most disturbing movie. I have never heard of that, and I never care to. Thank you. Take it back. Cheryl says, things like him asking Ellie, should we as parents be concerned for other children, is so insidious. Oh, God, yeah. And there's a really interesting thing when you look at the end of the last episode. There's like a montage of all of the people, like, who are suspects, as what really, even beyond just being suspects, people in the town who have been affected. And everybody's lying awake except Joe. And I didn't really, like, process that, but thinking back, Nige is, like, lying awake. We find out that he's in the back of this van. And that's where he's been hiding, because everybody's like, where'd he go? I can't believe that fucking Susan managed to skip town after all. Evidently, they really did not have a lock on that. Of course, we've got Mark lying awake. I think Paul is, like, not even in bed. I think he's sitting up and he's wide awake. It's a variety of shots of different people. And the focus on the shot that Joe is in is Ellie. But he is fast asleep. And yeah, it is really remarkable because he says something to Alec like, I'm tired of hiding, eventually. And there's a real sense of it being like, you're tired of hiding because it was a lot of effort, but I do not feel like you are haunted by what you did. It really feels like his denial has been so effective, and he has convinced himself it was just a terrible accident, that he really has sort of moved past it and doesn't seem to feel the guilt he should feel. It's more by the time everybody finds out what's going on, it doesn't feel like he regrets having murdered this kid so much as he regrets everybody finding out this thing about him, because now they're going to think badly of him. And it's like, yeah, because you're a murderer. And he's like, yeah, but I didn't rape him. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. Like, think about what the fuck you're saying. Jesus Christ. So, all right. I said I was going to start at the beginning, and I really, didn't, but all right. So, this scene, you guys. Apparently, Alex saying, oh, of course, at the end of the last episode, was him finding the emails to Joe. And it takes a while for us to get around to that, because what we have, first, Alec gets a physical, and he's told that he's going to have to get off the case. But he drops the bomb that he thinks he knows who the killer is, and then walks away from his boss like a real asshole. Then we have the kids, or Tommy. Oh, sorry, guys, if you can hear that. That's my phone going off. But we have Tommy's computer and everybody looking for the computer. And Ellie going to her sister and giving her sister the check she asked for in exchange for the information. And I'll tell you what, guys, I was truly surprised, excuse me, I have the hiccups all of a sudden, to find out that her sister actually had information. Because I really thought that she was just saying whatever she needed to get money. And as it turns out, the information isn't hugely helpful at this point, but it does wind up being something that makes sense. And she has seen a man who matches Nigel's description putting a bag of what looked like clothing into a garbage bin in the middle of the night, right around the time that Danny was supposed to have died. So she goes back and she talks to Alec, who is asking where her boy's computer is. She says that he told her it was stolen, but she admits that she doesn't believe that that's true. And he tells her that he called them in for questioning, her son and her husband. But he is really trying to play it as cool as he can here. Because it seemed to me, with the end of the last episode, the emails, that pointed to, okay, Tommy is involved somehow, right? And it just didn't even enter my head. Oh, he's calling in Tommy, knowing that Joe will come with him. Tommy isn't the aim here, though. So then we see the actual interview, and Alec has to sort of press Tom for the fact that he said that his computer was stolen. It wasn't. I have it here. And Father Paul told me that you were willing to tell us he abused you in exchange for not handing this over. And Tom said, is honest and says it had my emails with Danny on it. And Alec does something really interesting here, where he decides that he's going to press Tommy in front of Tom, in front of Joe, forgive me, obviously in order to put Joe on the back foot and make him realize, if you don't start to get your fucking story out, we're going to be going after your kid, because he actively threatened Danny multiple times via email. And it's a really smart move. This was the moment when he is pressing him, and I started to notice Joe, and I was like, no, what? I still can't handle this, guys. It's so upsetting, especially knowing Alec knows throughout this interview, he has to play this part, which I'm sure happens all the time. And I just felt like Joe saying it's just boys falling out, and the way that he tried to act like this was nothing, instead of being like, Tom, what happened? And getting maybe a little scared on behalf of his son. He tried too hard to deflect and immediately be like, we need a lawyer, we're out of here. And I was like, that doesn't feel like the response I would expect. I really would think the parent would shut down the whole thing, but I wouldn't think that they would react with that kind of obstruction. I think they would be a little bit upset at the fact that there was something going on they didn't know about, which is sort of how Ellie reacts when she finds out that Joe took Tommy out paintballing, right? And she just looks hurt at the fact that there was something going on that she didn't know about. But no, and then as they're leaving, he asks what Tom's shoe size is, and Joe tells him a 10, and I went, oh God, and I realized what was really going on. It was just so close together, and I just stopped and was like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And as they walk away, you see Alec watching them, and there's a really sad expression on his face. And the next scene, we have a brief one of Mark talking about how they're going to have to empty the room to make a nursery, Danny's room, and he doesn't want to, and he's really grieving about it. And it's a nice moment because it's him sort of finally having a moment to understand what Beth was trying to say, where she says her heart is so full of Danny and she doesn't have room for anything else. And I think just he doesn't realize that he's giving a very literal example of what she was trying to convey is happening with her emotionally, But then we go to the scene on the beach and the way that he's talking to Ellie and how he says, good work on this. Well done. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be really bad. And then we have the moment of him following up this sensor, this like signal that's going off. And this is really one of like the most tense scenes, even though I was pretty positive I fucking knew where he was going. Nevertheless, the way that they filmed it, the slowly accelerating beeping, the fact that he's like in the middle of that field that sort of separates all these homes for a while, so that a lot of people sort of notice him and are aware of like him tracking something down. There's just this slowly accelerating sound that reminds me of like when people use heartbeats in soundtracks and the heartbeat slowly amps up, and I always find that really, really affecting and really creepy. And eventually he goes into the house. We see Tommy and he's like watching TV, looks weirdly unsurprised at the fact that Alec is here. Doors also like open, and it's clear that Joe has done that on purpose. And Alec goes out into the garden and Joe is there with Danny's phone, and he just says, I'm sick of hiding. And we know what this is going to do to Ellie. Finding this out is just like, it's going to be horrific, because she, in the very last episode, asked, how the fuck could you not know, to Susan. And I will say, this doesn't feel like the same situation to me personally. While Susan was in the house with both the abuser and the victim, so I feel like you should have been able to see. I will say, I don't know. Like, I don't want to say that with such certainty. I like to think I would be observant enough to notice the body language and realize something was going on. That said, I can't attest to that, you know? But with Ellie, she has a job that keeps her out probably 50 hours a week at least. And it feels like it would be a lot easier to overlook what somebody is doing when they are just not at home, and the person that they are doing it to is not part of your family or somebody that comes by often. And it's specifically mentioned that Danny hasn't been coming to her house for the past few months, which makes sense now that you like, you know, in the past we had sort of thought, oh, it's because him and Tom had a falling out. And sure, but also I'm certain that there's like, Danny was like, well, after what's going on with his dad, I don't want to be around the both of them because it's going to be super weird and awkward to try and like act normal, you know? And so what he's doing when he's like out of the house, I could see how easy that would be to overlook. You know, it would just, he may get home after she's already asleep, or he goes out for a little while she's at work and she doesn't even know that he left the house at all. This feels to me like there's a much easier explanation for why she didn't know. Nevertheless, I don't blame her at all for being disgusted with herself for not knowing. I can totally understand how she's just like, there's no justification for the fact that I didn't know. Like, I can't believe I didn't know. I agree with you. But I'm just saying, from my perspective, it really makes sense. Let's see. Jill says, I saw it in the theater. Oh, they're talking about a different movie. Cheryl says, Ellie is a detective, though, but if she's not there to see it, she can't suspect him. That's what I mean. Like, yeah, she's a detective, but she has to, like, have some evidence to, like, examine in the first place. And it seems like he was really careful about behaving normally and having really simple, rational explanations for where he was. And considering that, he is home taking care of the kid all the time. I could see her just like thinking, oh, well, he deserves a night off, and not really like wanting to press too much. I do think it's interesting. At the end of the last episode, she yells at him for not finishing painting the bedroom. And I read it at the time as her lashing out at him the way she was accusing Alec of doing. And I think still that that's partially true. But I also wonder if that isn't sort of a nod at the fact that he hasn't been at home taking care of stuff the way that he should have been. That maybe something has been diverting his attention and he is shirking his responsibilities a bit. And why is that? Where has he been? I don't know if that's just, circumstantial or what, but I sort of looking back, I'm like, I wonder what that means. So then we have the scene where we get to like watch exactly what happened. And it's a really interesting, this is what I think it makes a really great mystery, is when you find out all the pieces and they truly do fit together in a way that you're like, I could see how that would happen. Even though some of the pieces seem a little extraneous. So what I'm talking about is Danny winds up like running out on Joe, and he cuts himself on some barbed wire, I think. And so that's what leads to him standing at the cliff's edge, and he's got blood dripping down his hand. And when we see that as viewers, we assume this is him running from somebody who's trying to hurt him or something. And I mean, it is, but we interpret it almost like he's mid-attack at this point, perhaps. And it's actually got nothing to do with what happens, because Joe convinces him to come back into the house, and everything is sort of looking like it's going to calm down. And instead, Danny says what he says, and just it hits too close to home for Joe. And he winds up putting the body in the boat, going to the beach in order to take care of it, wiping everything down. And we see the moment where Susan spots him out there, him hiding in the hut and seeing Mark come up. All of the cleanup that he does, and then getting into bed with his wife, and him looking really teary-eyed and upset. But it's really well done, because his upset, like I said, it just doesn't really feel like it's about Danny. It just feels like this self-pitying thing. And I stand by that. He claims I was in love with him. Ew, first of all, no you weren't. Second of all, you wouldn't have this sort of oh, I'm sleeping perfectly at night if you loved the person that you fucking murdered. So, yeah, no. I love Alec's stone-faced reaction when he says I was in love with him. Alex just trying his best to let this guy talk, even though it's clear he wants to reach across the table and slam his head into the table, And this all leads to, inevitably, the moment where Alec has to tell Ellie. You guys, I said last episode that a lot of the sort of point of this is him trying to tell Ellie you never really know anyone, right? And I've always said I find it hilarious when people are like, he's not capable of murder. And I'm like, you're wrong. Everybody, in my opinion, is capable of murder if the circumstances are correct. Everybody is. You don't think, because you have not put yourself into every potential situation in your mind. I guarantee you there is something that could make you feel justified or threatened or whatever enough to do something that right now to you is unthinkable. So the whole, oh, they would never is just completely not a factor whenever I consider, yes, they would. Absolutely they would. Despite that, Ellie's reaction is just, it makes such sense, because it's one thing to be like, oh, you're capable of murder because somebody was threatening our child. It's another thing to find out you're capable of murder because you are a predator and you were in the middle of preying on an 11-year-old boy, and I share a bed with you at night. I have a child the same age as the kid you were low-key trying to fuck. And that is unthinkable. It's a whole other thing. Thinking somebody's capable of murder, whatever. Thinking somebody's capable of this is just a level that it's like there's a specific area in hell reserved for people like that. And you just hope you don't know anyone who fits that category. And to think that you are married to the person that is like that. It's just, so when he finally tells her, of course, at first, she reacts with denial. And he's trying to ask her, initially, what time did you notice Joe come to bed? And she starts to realize what he's asking. And I love when he gets up and goes around the other side of the table and she says, why are you coming around here? And she can tell something's different right now. And no, he didn't. He didn't. And she gets up and crouches and looks like she's going to throw up and heaves a couple of times. Accurate. I mean, if I found out that Owen was involved in something like this, I would definitely throw up. I would probably spend half the day throwing up. I think every time I remembered, I would throw up. I think this is precisely what would happen. And then her saying, let me see him. What can I even do to him? He's like twice my size and there are cameras. And I was like, that's not going to matter. Oh my God. And sure enough, she goes in there, she faces him and asks him, did you do it? Is it true? Is what she says. And he doesn't deny killing him. He says, I never touched Tom or Fred. I never touched Danny. Elle, I've always loved you. And this is when she screams, he was 11, and he says, I can't explain it. And he asks, can I see Tom? Oh, Joe. Read the room, my man. No, you can't. Holy shit. Are you serious? What are you doing even asking that question? My God, dude. And she screams no and hits him until he falls out of his chair and then kicks him screaming, you're a fucking piece of shit. And I love Alec lets her for a minute before saying get her off him. I really believe he allowed that because he knew she needed to be able to do that. He was fully aware it was going to go that way. And he was just like, you know what? She has the right. So yeah, we're going to let her fucking beat the shit out of this guy for a second. It's fine. And I am here for that, honestly. I was genuinely really worried later when Mark is allowed to go and see him, because I thought for sure they were just going to let Mark into the cell and he was going to murder this man and wind up in prison himself. And instead we get this incredibly emotional scene that I loved it so much. Mark goes down to the beach and just is throwing shit. He doesn't know what to do with how he's feeling. And so eventually goes and sees Joe. And Joe's just saying, I'm so sorry. And the fucking look on Mark's face, God, his acting here is so good. He looks like he hasn't slept for a week, you know? And he says, you're not man enough to kill your own boy. You had to take mine. Which, damn, you know? Oh my God. He even says, I left him on the beach so you'd know. I could have left him in the sea. Like he's did him a favor or something. Like, are you what? And eventually, he only came to me in the first place because you were no sort of father to him because you hid him. And Mark, don't use me as a fucking excuse. It's like a roll of thunder when he says this, the scream, and there's spit flying and his eyes are like, and I love his acting in this moment. The rage and the hurt are just so all over his face. And he says, it was once, only ever once, and I'll suffer for that for my whole life now. And honestly, that's fucking, I suspect exactly what's going to happen. And this is when he says, you must have done things to him. And Joe denies it. And you can tell this is something that Ellie asks also later when she's talking to Alec. Everybody kind of wants that to be true because it would be so much simpler. And instead, knowing that wasn't yet a factor, it just makes this whole thing feel so much less like black and white, even though it still is black and white. I mean, it really is. But we like to be able to put people in certain categories. And when he hasn't actually committed the crime yet, it just feels like you can't quite do that. Yeah, God. So then we have Ellie, who is staying in a hotel because her fucking home is a crime scene now, and avoiding people because what the fuck are you going to say? And she's standing out in the middle of the field, and she's just seeming lost. And it's clear she, wants to talk to Beth, but she doesn't want to go over there. And Beth comes out and just says, how could you not know? And that's it. And she walks away. And it's really awful because I truly believe Ellie had no idea. I really believe she didn't. I don't think that there was even hints that she was ignoring. I think she really just didn't know. But from Beth's perspective, I can only imagine. I mean, Beth suspected that Mark was having an affair. She had time that he couldn't account for. She had inklings about things. So I think she's seeing it through the same lens, as he was trying to get away with shit and I knew what he was up to. Don't try and tell me you didn't know anything, and how at the end of this episode, Ellie says that she's going to leave and get a fresh start with her kids. Now, I know there's a second season of the show that is still called Broadchurch, so I expect that's not what happens. But I don't know how you move on in this kind of community after something like this has happened. Especially knowing how many people are going to think that you had to have known something. Even if there was a way to prove you had no idea, the fact that that man was married to you, that's still a bad enough association that in a small town, you just never get away from that. But if there's any flicker of a hint that people suspect she had anything to do with it at all, or had any inkling and covered it up, I don't know. At the same time, the fact that she has learned that this can happen to somebody like her, who's a trained detective living with the perpetrator, I feel like it's a fucking horrible trial by fire. But if we needed her to really get the picture that it can be anybody, and to grow suspicious enough to really push during investigations, I mean, this'll do it. She says something about how, what kind of fucking detective am I? I obviously can't keep doing this. And I'm like, well, maybe this is the thing that'll turn you into an amazing detective. Not that it's necessarily worth it, mind. And also, I think that David Tennant's in the next season as well, and he has supposedly been taken off duty because of his heart. And I'm wondering if he's going to go ahead and try and get that surgery after all, and get assigned again. And it's interesting because he says that he vacationed here in Broadchurch and that he would come down to the beach to get away from his parents arguing. So that little boy in his flashback was indeed himself. And I feel like there's more to that also that we're going to find out about, like, his history in Broadchurch. No theories, though, on what that would even be. So let's see. I'm like out of time, and I've talked about all the major things, but I'm trying to like make sure there isn't any other. There's the actual funeral at the end of the episode, and I said before how I really admire that this show is able to show us the devastation, but also give us these like brief moments of hope, and the community all coming together for Danny's funeral is honestly beautiful imagery. And I really loved everybody across the island all lighting these bonfires and the way that Father Paul had like gotten them all set up. Also, seeing Ellie away from everybody, talking to Alec, it really emphasizes how separate from everything she is right now, how isolated she is, because she has been so much a part of everything, you know, and it just is jarring to have the whole community on the beach doing this thing and her not be there. It's really, I love when a show is able to do things like that, create a sort of an expectation in the viewer that is so innate that when they change things up, you are genuinely like, ew, what the fuck is this? I don't like this. This isn't right. Just her being all by herself off to the side. I was like, she should be with everybody else. You know, she's a good person. She shouldn't be out here with Alec talking about leaving town. This sucks. So yeah, the funeral and the like bonfire ceremony. It's this really beautiful moment where all of these different fires on the beach light up, and as she is looking at them, Beth sees Danny standing there for a second. And there's a bit of a moment, too, with Father Paul, because he's the one who set this up. And he has a moment with the woman who owns the hotel. Her name I'm forgetting right now. And I really think that there might be a thing between them. I'm kind of hoping there will, because, I don't know, I feel like that could work. And he's cute as a button, and just seems like a good bloke, you know? And yeah, that's like the end of the episode is Mark coming up to Beth and putting his arm around her, and Chloe and her boyfriend. And her boyfriend seems like quite a little cinnamon roll as well. And all of them hugging one another, and this feeling of them being unified after a really rough time there, you know? And I'm certain it's going to take a while to recover from finding out who it was. Because how do you ever trust anybody again, you know? That's what this show is really about when you come down to it, is they want to show us the devastation of a murder like this and what it does to a full community of people. And what I think I will take away from this finale is finding the murderer. We have so many procedurals tracking down the criminal, and finally catching them is treated as this sort of like moment of celebration. Ha, we gotcha. And here is just a real look at no, finding out who did it is fucking awful. Yeah, there's closure. Good, they're not on the street anymore. But it's not happy. Exactly. Especially when it's something like this. The actions were already devastating because somebody is dead. But then finding out who was behind it, you know, there's that psychic at the beginning who says, it's somebody you know really well, and finding out who it is won't help. And, you know, I could see why Danny feels that way. I could see why he warned them, don't. because that's, so I think that that's a really beautiful and sad sort of like look at a real case like this. And I mean real in quotes, because obviously this is a fictional account, but I feel like they got to the heart of it a lot more than anything else that I've watched, where they don't sensationalize too much. They don't try and like make the bad guy feel like the kind of villain that we're used to, that it's easy to like throw them in jail and be like, good, fuck you. You're glad he's caught, but the havoc that it wreaks on everybody, it is sort of like, God, is it worth it to know, And I think that's a valuable thing to depict, because we do kind of get it into our heads that when you're searching for a murderer, it's like a game, There are so many fucking serial killer TV shows and movies and whatnot where it's literally made into a game. And so the reality of the loss of life and the effect of what is happening on real people is completely shoved to the sidelines, which is part of the problem for me with like true crime podcasts and TV. I always feel like there's so much focus on the murderer and the victims are completely secondary. And it's just, it's always given me kind of like an icky feeling to participate in that, especially when we start to do the thing like, oh, yeah, he was a killer, but he was really smart. And isn't he, it's like, okay, it's one thing when it's Hannibal and it's like incredibly over the top. It's another thing when we're trying to act like Ted Bundy was some sort of mastermind, when really he was a very average dude, and we've just done this weird thing with making him better and more interesting than he was. What about the fucking people, So I really appreciate this. And I think this is unusual, and I hope that Owen will agree to watch it, because I want to rewatch it now, knowing who did it. I want to go back and see. I'm so over time. Okay, guys, I got to wrap this up. The next episode is going to be, on Tuesday. Oh, good. I get to start the next season right away. I don't think I even realized that. Thank you again so much. I'm just realizing that I have forgotten who it was. It was, yes, Paul. Okay, good. I was about to say Paul, and then I was like, no, I'm thinking of Father Paul. Thank you again to Paul for commissioning this episode and the last few episodes, getting me through season 1. It looks like I'm booked up through April, and the April 13th, I'm doing season 2, episode 5. So just FYI, if anybody wants to commission further episodes, I think right now I'm booked into May. So if you book right now, there's still going to be quite a gap between the April and May episodes. But just wanting to warn you so that the gap doesn't grow too wide. And I'm really, really enjoying this show. So, and thank you to Jamie, who was the one who put forth that I should cover Broadchurch in the first place. I hope that you guys enjoy the coverage. I do. All right, I'll see you guys on Tuesday with the start of season 2. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.